In an era where we transmit data through fiber optics at nearly the speed of light, where robotic instruments can conduct brain surgery with sub-millimeter precision, and where we've discovered planets orbiting stars 500 light years away, we still struggle to answer the simplest biological question: why don't we feel well? You'd think with our level of advancement, mapping genomes, modeling weather systems, simulating black holes, we'd have decoded the science of human vitality. But the paradox remains: while we understand the outer universe with astonishing clarity, our grasp of the internal universe, the body and mind, remains surprisingly fragmentary. It's not due to a lack of data. The medical sciences are flooded with it. It's not because we lack specialists. In fact, we've subdivided the human body into so many compartments that the person often gets lost in the process. The problem is systems thinking, or rather, the lack of it. The human body is not a car where you replace the brakes or change the oil. It's a self-regulating, multidimensional, adaptive organism governed by physics, chemistry, and a deeply underestimated variable: consciousness. You don't just have a heart, you have a cardiovascular system that dynamically responds to emotional states, environmental stressors, and even your perception of time. You don't just have a brain, you have a neurochemical environment that is constantly rewiring itself based on thought, trauma, memory, and belief. This is not mysticism, this is measurable biology. The field is called neuroplasticity. The idea that your thoughts and emotions impact your physiology is not speculative. It's foundational science. Yet somehow, in modern health discourse, we treat mental states as separate from physical ones. That's like pretending gravity only applies on Mondays. In astrophysics, we have a principle: nothing exists in isolation. A star is not just a star, it is the byproduct of nuclear fusion, gravitational collapse, and the balance of energy exchange with its surrounding medium. Similarly, a human being is not just a brain and a skull, or a heart and a chest. You are a living system: bioelectrical, biomechanical, biochemical, and yes, even informational. Your body responds not just to what you eat or how much you sleep, but also to what you believe, how you perceive threat, how you manage uncertainty, and how you interpret meaning. And yet, modern health models often ignore this. Instead, we treat the symptom, not the signal. Consider this: if gravitational forces affect the orbits of moons, and quantum fields govern the behavior of particles too small to see, why would we assume that emotional states, which measurably alter hormone levels, immune function, and neural pathways, are somehow irrelevant to health? That's not rational. That's outdated. Take inflammation. We often view it as a localized biological error, but inflammation can be traced not just to physical injury or infection, but to chronic stress, unprocessed emotions, and systemic dysregulation. Your immune system isn't just reacting to pathogens, it's responding to perceived danger, whether from a microbe or a deadline. And this is key. The body doesn't distinguish between physical threat and psychological threat with the clarity we wish it did. That's not a bug in the system, that's an evolutionary feature. For most of human history, the stress response helped us survive in physically dangerous environments. But in the modern world, it often activates not when a tiger appears, but when your inbox fills up, or your sense of identity feels threatened, or your values feel misaligned. So when we talk about chronic illness, depression, fatigue, or autoimmune dysfunction, the better question might not be what's wrong with this organ, but rather, what's the system adapting to? Let's examine a foundational idea in physics. Energy doesn't disappear, it transforms. A collapsing star becomes a neutron star. A photon passing near gravity bends. A system under pressure reconfigures its state. Now think about this biologically. What happens when a human being suppresses emotion? When stress isn't resolved but stored? When grief isn't expressed but absorbed? Those energies don't vanish. They transform into muscle tension, hormonal dysregulation, impaired immunity, or neurochemical imbalance. It's not metaphor, it's mechanism. This leads us to the question most health systems rarely ask: what is the body trying to tell us? Imagine if NASA engineers ignored a spacecraft's warning lights and just painted over the dashboard. That would be absurd. And yet, when symptoms appear in our biology, fatigue, anxiety, chronic pain, we often mask them rather than decode them. Pain, in this view, is not punishment, it's data. Depression, could it be the nervous system's intelligent attempt to conserve energy when life becomes emotionally unsustainable? Autoimmune flare-ups? Perhaps an over-adaptive immune system caught in a loop of defense, not against microbes, but against chronic misalignment. In systems theory, feedback loops are essential for survival. Ignore the feedback, and the system destabilizes. A spacecraft veers off course. A star undergoes thermal runaway. A person becomes ill. So what happens if we begin to see health not as a binary sick, but as a spectrum of system coherence? A healthy body isn't one without symptoms. It's one in which the signals are understood, not suppressed. One of the most fascinating discoveries of modern neuroscience is the principle of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. This isn't science fiction. It's observable, repeatable, and foundational. Each thought you think, each emotional state you revisit, each belief you rehearse, all of them sculpt neural architecture. Like tectonic plates shifting over millennia, your mind literally reshapes the terrain of your biology. Now, pair that with epigenetics, the science of how genes are expressed based on environmental and psychological signals. Contrary to outdated dogma, your genes aren't static blueprints. They're dynamic systems, more like dimmer switches than on off buttons. And guess what influences those switches? Not just diet or toxins, but perception, belief, emotion, social context. The story you tell yourself about who you are and what you deserve can influence your cellular behavior. This means your biology isn't just reactive, it's participatory. The choices you make each day to breathe slowly or rush unconsciously, to choose curiosity over judgment, to rest instead of overextend, these aren't just lifestyle hacks, they are biochemical instructions. Every act of presence modulates your nervous system. Every act of awareness updates your internal algorithms. To frame it cosmologically, you are not simply drifting through space subject to random biological fate. You are, quite literally, a conscious participant in your own evolution. And that's where modern medicine often falls short. Not in its diagnostics, which are brilliant, but in its philosophy. It assumes the body is passive, a thing to be fixed, a machine to be tuned. But when you zoom out, and I mean really zoom out, you begin to see that the same self-organizing intelligence that forms galaxies also governs the cells in your body. Healing, then, is not about silencing the noise. It's about learning to interpret the signal. In astrophysics, there's a concept called resonance, where two systems vibrate in harmony, amplifying one another's energy. It shows up in celestial mechanics, atomic structures, even in the orbits of moons. What if I told you that human health follows the same principle? Your heart doesn't beat in isolation. It synchronizes with breath, brain waves, and even with other people in close proximity, a phenomenon known as physiological entrainment. In fact, studies using heart rate variability and electromagnetic field analysis show that your body is a network of feedback loops, constantly calibrating to internal and external stimuli. Your nervous system, immune system, endocrine system, they're not separate departments. They're interwoven like the gravitational fields of planetary bodies. They talk to each other in real time using electrochemical signals, peptides, and even light. Yes, biophoton emission, the release of ultra-weak light from your cells, is measurable and real. Your body literally glows at the quantum level. So when we think of symptoms like fatigue, inflammation, or chronic stress, it's not just the immune system acting up, it's the system as a whole falling out of resonance. Consider this analogy. If you were piloting a spacecraft and one subsystem began pulling excessive power, ignoring that imbalance wouldn't just affect one component, it could destabilize the entire mission. That's what happens when the human system is overloaded by chronic stress, emotional repression, or disconnection. It loses coherence. Not because it's failing, but because it's overcompensating for unresolved tension in another domain, often psychological or environmental. Now, here's something truly cosmic. Just as gravitational pull connects galaxies into clusters, humans are connected biologically through co-regulation. When you're around someone calm, your nervous system downshifts. When you're in a room full of panic, your cortisol rises. Connection is not just emotional, it's electrophysiological. And yet, we live in a culture that celebrates independence, stoicism, and overexertion, often at the cost of resonance. But nature doesn't reward isolation. In ecosystems, in galaxies, in biology, sustainability comes from interconnectedness. Technology, often hailed as the crown jewel of modern civilization, is not inherently good or bad. Like fire or gravity, it simply is. What matters is the consciousness behind its use. The same smartphone that connects you to medical research and real-time diagnostics can also trap you in feedback loops of anxiety, distraction, and sleep disruption. The same algorithms that detect astronomical anomalies can also detect and manipulate your psychological vulnerabilities. In other words, technology mirrors the operator. A telescope in the hands of Galileo redefined the cosmos. A screen in the hands of a distracted mind? That's a different story. And yet, we often externalize both blame and responsibility. The world is making me sick. The algorithm is hijacking my brain. But in science, we know that inputs only matter if the system accepts them. Your attention is a scarce resource. Like photons in a vacuum, it moves in straight lines until something bends or absorbs it, and where your attention goes, biochemistry follows. This isn't esoterica, it's physiology. Dopamine, cortisol, oxytocin, all of them fluctuate based on what you perceive, what you expect, and how your nervous system interprets safety or threat. So let's ask an empirical question. If our environment, physical, digital, emotional, is increasingly filled with signals that dysregulate attention and erode sleep, connection, and meaning, then isn't it rational to expect a rise in chronic illness, immune suppression, and mental fatigue? This isn't about fear, it's about systems awareness. A spacecraft isn't harmed by radiation because of the vacuum. It's harmed if it lacks proper shielding, calibration, and autonomous correction protocols. Likewise, the human being of the 21st century doesn't fail because of the presence of technology. We struggle when we abandon our inner capacity for self-regulation and recalibration. In cosmology, equilibrium is rarely a static state. It's dynamic, a balance of opposing forces, constantly adjusting. The same applies to health. It's not the absence of stimuli, it's the appropriate response to them. In biology, as in astrophysics, stability is not stasis. From subatomic particles to spiral galaxies, every structure is maintained through dynamic equilibrium, a continuous negotiation between input and output, force and resistance, signal and feedback. Health, then, is not the absence of disturbance. It is the system's ability to respond to disturbance without losing coherence. Your body, like any well-tuned spacecraft, is designed to adapt, repair, and recalibrate. It does so through the immune response, neuroplasticity, hormonal modulation, and even social interaction. But this adaptive intelligence requires one key component: signal clarity. When the system is overwhelmed by misinformation, chronic stress, emotional repression, or social disconnection, the feedback loops break down. The result isn't disease in the simplistic sense. It's systemic dysregulation. Like a planet knocked out of orbit, it doesn't stop spinning, it just stops sinking. That's why true health can't be reduced to metrics like cholesterol levels or body mass index alone. Those are snapshots, not symphonies. A more accurate measure of health might be, how well does your system integrate internal and external signals in a way that preserves adaptive function, cognitive clarity, and emotional integrity? In other words, are you in tune with your body, your context, your story? The ancients intuited this through metaphor. Today, we explore through data, wearable tech, functional MRI scans, psychoneuroimmunology. But regardless of lens, the principle remains: resonance matters. Alignment isn't just a spiritual concept, it's a biological necessity. So what do? We stop treating symptoms like enemies. We start interpreting them as feedback. We stop separating physical from emotional, individual from systemic. because in the natural world, from ecosystems to supernovae, nothing operates in isolation. When we speak of health, we typically imagine it as something personal, something that exists within the skin, that begins and ends with the individual. But in astrophysics, we know that no object exists without affecting its environment. The sun doesn't just burn, it stabilizes the orbits of 8 planets. A black hole doesn't just collapse, it shapes the architecture of galaxies. And a single electron, under the right conditions, can influence an entire quantum field. In the same way, your biology, your state of coherence is not private. It's broadcast, it's mirrored, it's felt. Your stress affects your children's development. Your emotional tone influences your team's creativity. Your attention shapes collective discourse. This is not philosophy. This is network theory. In complex systems, biological, ecological, or technological, a shift in just one node can reconfigure the behavior of the entire system. This means that healing is not a solo act. It's a contribution to species-wide evolution. A nervous system in balance models safety. A mind rooted in curiosity instead of fear expands the domain of possibility for others. And every time you choose response over reaction, clarity over noise, you subtly alter the probability landscape of the people around you. Imagine a population where emotional regulation is as prioritized as literacy, where empathy is not outsourced to therapy sessions but woven into daily discourse, where health is not a personal project but a planetary parameter. That's not utopia, that's thermodynamics. Systems move toward entropy when energy is wasted through disconnection and fragmentation. They move toward order when feedback is integrated and resources circulate with efficiency. So what's the takeaway? Your biology is not just a private matter, it is a cosmic node nested within layers of influence from the microbiome to the city, from the family to the biosphere. You are not just made of stardust. You are participating in star logic, constantly transmitting, receiving, evolving. In science, humility is not a weakness, it's a requirement. The cosmos does not adjust itself to fit our assumptions. It reveals itself only when we ask the right questions. So here's one worth asking. What if the future of health isn't found in another pharmaceutical breakthrough or wearable device, but in a shift of perspective? What if the next great revolution isn't external, but internal? We've learned to look outward, to telescopes, to laboratories, to artificial intelligence. But the frontier that remains least explored, and perhaps most consequential, is the interface between awareness and biology. Your perception of reality shapes your hormones. Your beliefs alter gene expression. Your emotions influence inflammatory pathways. These are not speculations. These are repeatable, testable observations. So why is this truth that consciousness participates in physiology so rarely centered in our conversations about health? Perhaps because it places responsibility and power back in the hands of the individual. And with great power comes the uncomfortable truth. You're not just the subject of biology. You're also the author. You don't control the laws of physics. You don't bypass entropy. But within the range of possibility allowed by nature, your choices matter. Whether you pause to breathe before reacting, whether you rest when the culture says push harder, whether you listen to subtle signals before they become symptoms, these micro-choices are biological events. They accumulate, they cascade, they compound over time. The cosmos unfolds not in leaps, but in patterns, spirals, orbits, cycles. And so does your healing. Look around you. You live on a planet orbiting a medium-sized star, spinning at 10 miles per hour, hurtling through the galaxy at 67, 0 miles per hour, all while maintaining the precise conditions needed for carbon-based life to emerge, breathe, think, and wonder. You are one expression of that wonder, a system of atoms forged in ancient stars, arranged by evolution, animated by electricity, and guided somehow by self-awareness. And yet, in all of this cosmic choreography, we still doubt our own worth. We question our place. We treat the body as a machine, the mind as a glitch, and health as a commodity. But science reminds us, The very fact that you can ask what health means, that you can observe, reflect, and redirect is evidence of extraordinary complexity and possibility. You are not broken. You are an adaptive, responsive, feedback-driven node in a self-organizing universe. You were built not just to survive, but to integrate, to align with your environment, recalibrate when stressed, and regenerate when broken. So perhaps the most important shift isn't medical or technological, but epistemological. We must move from asking, what can fix me, to asking, what does my system need to reconnect? Because just as galaxies stabilize through gravity and ecosystems flourish through biodiversity, the human system thrives through coherence between cells, between organs, between people. You are not separate from this. You are not small. You are a self-aware expression of cosmic evolution, capable of influencing the trajectory of your own biology and perhaps even that of your species. So let's not trivialize health to symptoms or supplements. Let's elevate it to the level of planetary stewardship, neural integrity, and yes, universal resonance. Because in the end, the truth they rarely tell you, not because it's hidden, but because we often fail to ask, is this: you are not just part of the universe. You are the universe becoming aware of itself and remembering how to stay in tune